The Long Past and Other Stories is a collection of short stories and novellas that all share the same setting of a Weird West steampunk reimagining of history. In this world, during the Era War, or as we would know it now, the Second Opium War, mages create a rift in time and space between the Victorian era and the Cretaceous period. So huge amounts of floodwaters are released and dinosaurs begin to creep into their world. The first story, that's actually titled The Long Past, features a black mountain man named Grover who has learned to tame a couple of dinosaurs and makes a living by hunting the others, and lives part-time out in the Riftlands and part-time in the small city of Fort Arvada. Lawrence is Grover's long-lost love, who was declared dead during the Era War, but has now shown up with a couple Thuragist professors who are answering to the House of Representatives to try and find out if they can make some use of the open rift lands. And so the use that they want to have of it is a pretty nefarious one that Grover doesn't want to have anything to do with. And he's just found all this out at a party where they've tried to offer him a job working for them, and Grover has stormed out. The character Betty, who's mentioned, is a Avamasaur, a feathered dinosaur that Grover has tamed and that he rides. An excerpt from The Long Past and Other Stories by Ginn Hale. Read by Ginn Hale. Betty wasn't too pleased to be woke in the dark of night. When Grover called her name, she lifted her head from the hay where she'd bedded down, and through the deep gloom Grover recognized the shine of her eyes. After a couple chirps, she plopped her head right back down. "Damn it, Betty," Grover grumbled. "Grove, wait." Lawrence paused at the stable door. The faint glow of light from the house outlined his gaunt form. "Hell no," Grove snapped. He glared at Betty. "Come on, you, we're leaving." Betty pushed her head farther beneath her feathered arm, pretending not to hear him, and Lawrence closed in behind him. "Grove." Lawrence's left hand lighted upon Grover's shoulder. "Don't." He knocked Lawrence's hand away hard. "I ain't in any mood to hear anything you or those sons of bitches have to say." Lawrence stepped back. Grover stomped into the horse stall and frowned at Betty while she feigned sleep. He glowered over his shoulder to the far wall where his saddle and tack faded into darkness. He needed a lamp. If he'd had any sense, he would have brought one from the kitchen, but he was in no temper to go back and ask anyone for anything. Lawrence cupped his hand to his mouth, like he was warming it with his breath. Then he spread his fingers, and small orbs of gold light drifted from his lips, like he was blowing luminous soap bubbles. They drifted through the stable, throwing off soft gold glow across the weathered wood and bales of alfalfa. Betty, as well as several horses, took note, though the horses, being shy creatures, pricked up their ears and went tense. Betty hopped up and snapped after one of the filmy lights, like she thought it was a spicy firefly. "She gonna be sick she eats one of those things?" Grover heard the surliness in his own voice, but he couldn't help it. He felt too angry to offer thanks. He hadn't asked for this, and if Lawrence hadn't been here, he would have worked his own way through the gloom. He hadn't needed Lawrence's help for 8 years now. Lawrence met his glare. He looked damn tired, but he didn't say a word. Wasn't like him to keep so quiet, Grover thought, but then he reminded himself that he had no idea what Lawrence was like anymore. If he'd changed so greatly that he could support the Tuckers' plans, the man Grover had known might as well have died 6 years ago. Grover would almost have preferred that than to think that Lawrence had so completely changed that he could betray the ideals that they'd once shared. The notion cut deep, prickling at old resentments far down in Grover's core, remnants of his earliest sense of the injustice and the difference of their circumstances. He'd always had to work twice as hard for anyone to think him even half as good as Lawrence. But it didn't do any good to dwell on how Lawrence had been born rich and white and able to command the magic of earth, while Grover had been forced into a role of servant just because of the color of his skin. He was grown now, and had put away childish tantrums about the unfairness of the world. Moaning and railing didn't change nothing. Deeds, not words, showed the true worth of a man, and Grover knew he was better than the Tuckers, better even than this stranger who'd come home answering to Lawrence's name. They and Lawrence could go to hell if they thought he'd aid them in any way. Not for money, not even for long-lost love. Though Grover reckoned his refusal would require him exiting Fort Arvada right away, before they realized they couldn't buy him. Because as soon as they did, he didn't doubt the Tuckers would find a reason that he should lose his liberty. And with Sheriff Lee on their side, it wouldn't take long to have him fit up as an outlaw. No, he'd go up the mountain, and if they followed him, well, there were lots of ways that men, even trained soldiers and mages, could disappear, especially near the rift. Feeling better for having a plan, Grover fetched his saddle, bags, and lead. Then he turned back. He discovered Betty standing with her neck extended over the stall door for Lawrence to stroke her beak. Very slowly, Lawrence lifted his ivory and gold right hand and held it out for Betty to inspect. Betty gave the hinged plates of the palm her owl-eyed look, but then went ahead and ran her beak across the ivory fingers. The relief in Lawrence's expression was so easy to read that Grover felt a pang of deep sympathy. It took a heap of rejection to make a man look that thankful for the acceptance of a critter like Betty. The thought tempered a little of Grover's rage, but not enough to let him forget all that the Tuckers had said, or Lawrence's silence in the wake of their suggestions. "You might as well go back to the dance." Grover walked past him and into the stall. He threaded the leather lead under Betty's arms and buckled it across her back. "I'm not helping you find the rift. I don't care if you offer to make me the king of California." "That's not why I followed you out here." "Why then?" Grover turned on him. "Because if it's for my rollicking company, I gotta warn you, I'm in something of a foul temper." Lawrence simply nodded, and Grover scowled at him. "God's sake, Lawrence, why can't you damn well say anything? Did you lose your tongue as well as your arm?" Grover regretted the words the moment they escaped his mouth, and seeing the brief flicker of pain in Lawrence's expression, he realized how low a blow he'd dealt the other man. "I didn't mean—" Grover began, but Lawrence cut him off. "That doesn't matter," he said. "What's important is that you understand how necessary it is for me to get to the rift before the Tuckers." Grover paused, with Betty's saddle in his arms. "What do you mean?" Grover asked. "You work for them. You ain't thinking you can undercut the feds and stake a private claim like your granddaddy did, are you?" "No." Lawrence stole a glance back over his shoulder to the stable doors, then lowered his voice. "I told you, I'm working to close the rifts. That's why I must reach the last one before they do. But I need your help to get there." Grover stared at him. Lawrence's allegiance and obedience to the office of Theurgy and Magicum glittered across his chest in an array of bright metals. But what he suggested sounded like insubordination. Or worse, if the Tuckers really were reporting to the House of Representatives. "Are we talking about an act of treason here?" Grover asked in a whisper. Lawrence's expression turned particularly grim. "Please help me, Grove. I don't know that I can do this without you." Grover silently absorbed the enormity that simple request belied. A mage flouting the orders of his Theurgist superiors might as well have been defying God. Wasn't that the law? Grover couldn't imagine that either of the Tuckers would take such an insubordination lightly. And it wasn't as if an accomplice would get off easy either. If he and Lawrence got caught at this, then likely they'd share a gallows. Only minutes before, Grover had been thinking that assaulting the Tucker brothers wasn't worth hanging for. But stopping them? That might be. Grover felt sick at the thought of being strung up. He'd seen too many men kick and jerk at the end of a rope not to, but he forced his fear down. "How soon can you get packed and be ready to ride?" Grover asked. "First light tomorrow morning," Lawrence answered.